Hello everyone, and welcome back to another episode in BI Consulting Group's 11G Webinar Series. Happy holidays everybody. My name is Brent Kardell, Regional Sales Director for BI Consulting Group. This webinar is brought to you by BI Consulting Group, a firm that specializes exclusively on Oracle Business Intelligence and Enterprise Performance Management. And we were an official beta partner of 11G and now have multiple projects going on with 11G. Today's 11G webinar is entitled OBIEE 11G, How Do I Upgrade from OBIEE 10G? Please feel free to ask questions in the question panel while the webinar is going on, and time willing, we will get to them. If not, we will attempt to answer questions as soon as possible, and please don't forget to follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and on our blog sites. With that, I will pass this off to one of our solution engineers, Marty Mersinger. Marty has been focused on 11G since June of this year and is a primary member of BICG's 11G task force. Marty will walk you through what it looks like to go through a process of upgrading OBIEE 10G to 11G. With that, I'll turn it over to Marty.
Thank you, Brent. Welcome everyone to the, as Brent said, the next in our series of 11G. This one is looking specifically at the upgrade process from a 10G environment to 11G. So some of the things we want to look at is what are the requirements when we're looking at the upgrade, what parts of 10G can or will be upgraded, what are some of the differences of the security model between 10G and 11G? This is important, especially when you go in to do your regression testing. You need to know where your security is in place at and how to modify it. We'll look specifically at the upgrade assistant, which will be used to upgrade the 10G components. We'll run through a demonstration of an actual upgrade process. Then we'll look at some of the post-upgrade tasks that you'd have to look at, and then some things that may not work exactly as they were working in 10G. And if we have time, then we'll go into some Q&A. So from a requirements standpoint, what do we need to know about before we start upgrading? One thing is we need to know what version of 10G we're on. So the upgrade to 11G will only support from 10.132 and later, and that would cover your web catalog, your RPD, and your scheduler. If you have BI Publisher that you need to migrate, it's going to be supported from 10.134 and later. And real-time decisions, you can see, is 3.0. You need to know, you also need to ask some questions. We've got a white paper on our website which gives you some information and questions about whether or not the upgrade is right for you at the right time. For instance, BI apps currently is not supported. So if you're running any kind of apps, finance, HR, any of those, then you have to think twice before you consider going to 11G. When you do the upgrade, you have to have your 11G installed and running with at least the default installation. What I mean by that is when you do the install, you'll have the sample app Lite, which comes with it. It's kind of like the 11G version of Paint. You want to be familiar and understand the 11G directory structure because you need to know where log files are located, where the upgrade assistance is located, where other components, such as if you're upgrading BI Publisher, where are they going to be placed at? So we're going to take a quick look at some of that. And the other requirement is your admin and managed servers, which is part of your 11G instance, need to remain up and running during the entire upgrade process. Because what happens is the upgrade is going to put everything into place in the running environment, and it'll start and stop services as necessary. and when it's completed, you'll have an up and running environment with your migrated components. The other aspect is you've got to have your 10G data sources and components available to the 11G server where they're accessible, because, like I said, it's going to put everything up and running in your environment. So it needs to be able to access those data sources, your data warehouse where your data resides, in order to get those reports and everything else running as soon as you log in. And finally, if you have any kind of manual customizations with the INI file, like if you overrode the authentication aspect, you would need to configure that in the 11G in the same way that you had in 10G before you do the upgrade. So in preparation, you want to look at what we have. You want to look at your process. So this is just a process flow of the migration, basically making sure you've got your 11G environment up and configured, you've tested that out, and then it's questions of whether or not you're doing the BI aspect, the BI publisher, or both. And you can see these are kind of high-level steps that you'll go through. And we'll get more into exactly what some of these steps are. As you can see from, if you follow the BIEE, you've got the RPD, the web catalog, you've got the scheduler, you've got, and then post-upgrade steps, and then a verification step. So, as I said, the directory structure is important to understand. It is completely different from 10G. So you start out with your Fusion middleware home, wherever that may be located, and then you have your components underneath that. The important ones that you're going to need to know about with doing the upgrade is under the instance 1, which you see on the left-hand side. Underneath that is where you're going to have the log files, repository files, the catalog files. All of those will be located underneath there. So we'll show some more of that as we get closer to the demonstration here. Here again, this is a set of information which is in Oracle's documentation, where some of the important pieces, components that you'd think of, the files that you want to be familiar with, where they're located. So Oracle has laid them out comparing where they were in 10G to where they are in 11G. So what can and cannot be upgraded? All right. One thing we can upgrade is the RPD and the web catalog. Parts that would be upgraded is users and groups, their permissions, the existing security model, and any kind of report data source. So, but there are some differences in how users and groups and permissions are handled between 10G and 11G. We'll get more into that when we start talking some of the differences of what exists within the security model itself. The scheduler schema, or delivers, depending on what you're more familiar with understanding, is the jobs and the job history will be migrated, but the jobs will not be started. So it'll put the records into place into the 11G schema and into the tables, but you're going to have to go back in as a post task to start all of those scheduled jobs back up in the 11G environment. BI Publisher repository, it's going to become part of the web catalog, but the upgrade for this is a two-step process. And I'll tell you more about that further into the webinar. And then there's the scheduler for BI Publisher, which will also be migrated over as well. So the security model for 11G, we break it into three aspects. You got the presentation catalog, the RPD, and the policy store. That's pretty much the way presentation RPD is very similar to what was in 10G, but there are some differences. where 10G before would allow for users and groups to be defined within the RPD. 11G does not allow for that. The reason this is important on an upgrade process is, as I said previously, you need to be able to verify and check your environment after the upgrade. You need to, that includes checking out your security and how that's in place. So if you need to verify what users are in place, what groups are in place, you're going to need to know where they're located. The other aspect of the RPD is groups themselves are no longer defined as they were in 10G. Now what we have is what's called application roles. These application roles are, you can kind of consider them as groups, but it's more of an internal group to within the OBIEE environment. So your external groups that you currently use, you would map those to the application roles as necessary and to get the same kind of permission settings. Now for backwards compatibility, the presentation catalog does include the groups as they were in 10G, but Oracle's recommending that you migrate to the application role even in the presentation catalog so that you're managing your security all in one place, which would be through the Fusion middleware. Some things that do not change with regards to security is like your initialization blocks. Those will still be intact if you're using external authentication, authorization. Those don't go away. It would still work the same way as it did in 10G. As I stated, your groups, your presentation groups for your web catalog, they would still exist. But you'd want to migrate those over to use the application role. So your application role and your groups would exist in the web catalog after the migration. And finally, you got an SA system subject area, which, if you're not familiar with that, that was primarily put in place to obtain user and group information, profile information when running iBot information so that you could send an iBot to a group rather than to an individual user. So that still is supported within 11G as well. So, like I said, just briefly, what's some of the differences? You've got how users and groups are defined, where the security policies, you have a policy store, so that's being there. You no longer have the administrator user within the RPD, but you do have repository encryption, which is different. You didn't have that in 10G. You do have it in 11G. So there'll be a password that you have to put in during the upgrade process to encrypt the repository as it's being migrated. And what doesn't change, as I stated, is initialization blocks, catalog groups, and the SA system subject area. So looking at the upgrade system itself, all right, it has the initial screen. You've got multiple options in here. You have to select what you're going to migrate, and if you have multiple aspects, so if you're going to migrate the RPD and catalog, those would be migrated together. If you needed to run the scheduler schema to migrate that and or BI Publisher, you would rerun the upgrade assistant as many times as necessary in order to migrate all the components across. Now, if you're working within a clustered environment, right, you would not upgrade every individual node within that cluster. You would upgrade a single node and then use the 11G scale out to build your clustered environment. But I know I've worked with some clients before that they had multiple RPDs running in a production environment, and it was not clustered. So in that case, you would run the UA assistant to migrate each of those RPDs independently of each other. You would not be able to migrate both or how many you have at the same time. So let's see what an actual demonstration kind of looks like. So get out of this. Let me see. I may need some technical assistance here to get this back in place.
Marty, how you doing? Need me to?
I was trying to get Brian. I was just trying to get Brian if he's got the password for this VM.
Okay. Let me see if I can get a hold of him.
There's always something that happens within a live demo. Push comes to shove, I've got a full set of slides that have all of the steps, step by step, that I'd want to go through. But should be able to get this fairly quickly here, hopefully. Well, that took care of that one.
Marty, while you're looking for that, I was unable to get in touch with Brian, by the way. While you're looking for that, why don't I inform everyone of some upcoming activities with BICG and some workshops just to fill the time while we get going here.
We're back.
I'm sorry.
We're back in.
Okay, very good.
Okay, what I want to show you is, the first steps that you're going to go through is you got the you want to verify your 11G environment is up and running, which I'm showing here. And here we can see we've got the sample app Lite, which is the default installation for the 11G. This is the repository. And we also have the sample app Lite web catalog in place. And we can also verify coming into the system. We can see we've got our subject areas, which is all sample app Lite, is nothing like the 10G information that we'll be using.
Hey Marty, this is Brent. Are you assuming that we are seeing this content on the screen right now? Because I'm not seeing it.
Yeah, that's it.
No, I'm seeing the slides still. There we go.
How's that?
There we go.
Okay.
You're good now.
All right, so as I was showing you, we've got the web catalog, the RPD. So this is the Fusion Enterprise Manager. We're verifying our 11G environment, as well as we're looking at from the OBIEE 11G homepage that we're looking at the system is up and running and ready to go. So I'm going to sign out of this. And we could also see, here's my Fusion middleware home, this which we've identified as FMW home. And here again, I've got the catalog, as well as I can check the repository, and as you can see that I've got the sample app light. So what I've also done is I've set up an environment. I've migrated my 10G components that I'm going to migrate and set them up within a same structure as OBIEE 10G. Looking at it from here, I just migrated what was necessary. You don't have to migrate the whole thing. And this, I've migrated it because I don't have access to the actual 10G server. So here we're going to migrate the sample sales, and I've got the sample sales catalog as well that we're going to migrate in. That would give me my root. So what we want to first do is, you can see the UA upgrade assistance is going to be located at your Fusion Middleware Home, Oracle BI1 bin directory. And we're just going to type in UA. There's a batch file there if you're running Windows. If you're running Linux, it's going to be the same thing. Take note, it's telling you where your log file is going to be located right here. So you're going to want to know where that's located in order to verify if there's any errors or warnings that during the upgrade process. So we'll get in. It gives us the initial screen. And so here we're going to pick the RPD in the presentation catalog. Like I said, if you needed to upgrade the other components, you'd come back into the UA, select the appropriate one, and then migrate that piece. So you're going to go through this multiple steps depending on what components you're migrating. And then there's a verify instance which you'd run after the migration step. So we're going to upgrade our repository, and we can either browse or enter the information. So I'm going to tell where my 10G repository is located. And I'm going to put in the administrator's password. And username. And then, remember I said the 11G RPD gets encrypted. So we need to put in a password for the encrypted RPD. So I'm just going to enter something simple like my upgrade. And confirm it. And I'm also going to upgrade my catalog. So here you'll see there's two components. You've got an upgrade directory and you got the catalog deliveries directory. Deliveries is where iBot information results would be stored at. And if you can either create a dummy directory, it could be, if you don't have anything, you could point it to a null, basically an empty directory. I've gone ahead and created both a deliveries as well as my catalog. And my deliveries doesn't have anything in it, but that's okay. So then we click on Next, and now we're looking at the web catalog, or the WebLogic information. So I put in my port number for WebLogic, as well as my WebLogic administrator and password. So it looks, checks my environment, says okay, everything's good there. And it gives me a summary of what it's going to migrate. So it's got the RPD, which is my sample sales. It's using the administrator username for the RPD and the catalog that I'm going to migrate. So then I click on the upgrade, and it's going to go through that process. Now I've got a small RPD and a small web catalog, so it shouldn't take too much too long to migrate this piece of it. So to conserve some time while that's running, so depending on how long, how big your RPD is, will depend on how much time it's going to take, how many sources you're dealing with. Again, and here again at the bottom you'll see where the log file is located. When the process is done, you're going to want to migrate, check that catalog, make sure it's working for any kind of errors should they occur. So you'll see it's starting my services back up right here, which is underneath the bar. So the upgrade's finished. It says succeeded. And then you'll get a quick summary of what was done. And you'd go ahead and close this out. So that's very simply is your first step of getting the upgrade process done. Now what we want to do is we're going to go back into the Upgrade Assistant and get to the screen. And we want to run the verify instance after we've done our migration. So here again, we're going to enter the WebLogic information. So the Upgrade Assistant is very nice, works quite well. I've got no manually entered port values. So you just click on to verify. And the next release of 11G, which is 11.114, that one's going to have some improved upgrade assistance changes into it. That exactly what those changes are, I'm not sure. I don't have any of the details on that, but that is one of the big things that they have said is going to be in the next release. So here again, it's going through a verification process, and it's already succeeded on the analytics. The BI Publishers, we haven't done any migration to it, but it is checking the services within the 11G environment. And we see that both of those have succeeded successfully. And then it gives you a quick verification report to show what was checked, whether or not you had any errors. They'll also show up the number of tests that passed. And that, very quickly, is your upgrade process. Now what we want to do is start looking at it from our own viewpoint. So here, we want to here we can see we've got sample sales, where before we had that sample, the light, the sample app light. And this is our 10G. Let's go over to our 11G instance here. So we get under here, we can get to our presentation, into our catalog. So here we had the 11G environment. We had previously the sample app light alone. Now we also see we have the catalog for sample sales. So that's been migrated. And we can also come into the BI server aspect, where before we had Paint, Sample App Lite RPD, we now have the sample sales. Notice it puts on this numeric indexing, if you want to call it an index. It basically just makes sure it's unique, puts that value into place when it does the migration. So again, we can verify our services. We can take a look, and we should be able to log in and see our migrated RPD information, our subject areas. So here, if we look, now we see, all right, these are the dashboards that have changed. Before we had that quick one. Now we've got the sample sales, and this is the 10G dashboards. And if we look at our analysis, which is our answers, now we have the sample sales and the sample sales reduced. So if you're familiar with the sample sales 10G, you'll see that these are basically the same thing that was running in 10G, but now we have them running in our 11G environment. So there's our set of tables that you'd be familiar with, and we can then run the necessary reports. We can also look at it within our Fusion Middleware Enterprise Manager. And we'll see all of our components are back up and running. So that process works fine. And I can come over into the core application under the BI side. And here again, I'll see my new repository, which is the migrated sample sales, is now running, as well as my sample sales web catalog is running in place. So that very quickly is the upgrade process, and it also goes through and shows us the verification that you're going to go through. And it goes checking out your 11G instance, make sure it's up and running. You'd run your reports, look for any kind of issues that may have happened with the migration. So with that in place, here again, this is just from a step-by-step viewpoint in textual format of what I basically went through. This is all laid out, so you go through the entire upgrade. It'll give you some information of where things are located as well. But after you've done that, other than the quick check that we've done already, then you also want to go through some additional post-upgrade tasks, such as that going through the log file, looking for any kind of errors or warnings. Now, I used a very simple 10G repository and web catalog, so wouldn't expect much errors in there because it's really not been modified. So depending on your modifications, your complexity of your own RPD and your reports, you may have errors or warnings that you may need to address. The other aspect, and this is some of the things that don't get migrated, as I stated earlier, was the scheduler iBots, or what they now refer to as agents. Those are not scheduled, so you have to go back through and reschedule those after your migration is completed. If you have custom changes, custom messages in your XMLs, JavaScript changes, those would all have to be reapplied manually before they come in. If your environment, if your variables within your RPD, if you've defined those to have specific paths within them, you'd want to make sure and check that those paths are still valid for your 11G environment versus what was in 10G. Because typically you're not going to be running them on the same server. Definitely the paths have changed, so you may want to double check those as well. And then the BI Publisher has some specific. As I stated, you can migrate your BI Publisher, but it's a two-step process. In other words, you would run the Upgrade Assistant, which would migrate your 10G BI Publisher reports and migrate those to the 11G file structure. Because 10G is a file structure, it'll just migrate them into the 11G paths. Then the second step is to get those reports into the web catalog before you could actually use those. So there's another additional step for a BI Publisher, which is separate from the Upgrade Assistant. There's another command program that you'd run that would upgrade that, put those BI Publisher reports from the file system into your 11G web catalog, which is where 11G is storing all of the BI Publisher information now. Then finally, there's things that you want to look at after you've done your migration where you've got appearances and behavioral changes that may not work the same way. One of these reasons is we've got a totally different charting engine in 11G than what we had in 10G. Completely different. Both BI Publisher and the OBIEE side uses the same charting engine now, where before they were two different ones. So there's some aspects that are different. So I've listed a few of them here, such as y-axis labels. Before in 10G you could rotate them, like do a 45-degree rotation. In 11G you can either do 0 or 90. You lose that 45-degree rotation, so if you have very long names on your axis, you could get that run over between the names. Hidden columns. If you use them for labels, you've got some differences there where it would not hide them. You got pivot chart rows have changed, missing labels because of the different charting engines, line charts not stacking in the same manner. So there's a number of things. I've got this link at the bottom of this right here, which gives a complete list, and it's a fairly extensive list of things that you want to double check. You may have some of these things in your own environment, you may not, but you want to check and verify. So this will give you a list of things that you need to look at from a regression standpoint for the 11G upgrade. And that very quickly is a very simple upgrade process. Like I said, the Upgrade Assistant works very nicely. We've run it in Linux environment as well as in Windows environment. It works very nicely. Not had any problems with it. Problems we've seen have been fixes or tweaks that we'd have to make to the RPD that you'd have to resolve before the upgrade would work. 11G looks very strongly at the consistency checks. There's new checks in place, so it looks at those, and those would be where you'd have to resolve things. So I think we're going to have some time for Q&A if anybody's got questions, and I'm going to give it back to Brad, our Brent, for a little bit here while I take a look at some of the questions if anybody has any.
Great. Thank you, Marty. That's some great information. Okay, before we get back into Marty answering some of the questions that you've generated, I'd like to thank you all for attending today's webinar. And I also want to make you aware of some of the events that the BICG has coming up. The January webinar, which will be up on our website by the end of today will focus on one of our specific accounts, Diebold. Diebold will join us to address how they made their decision to go with the BI applications, how they're doing with their roadmap, as well as how they're doing with their implementation of financial and sales analytics, hitting their back-end Oracle EBS system. The February webinar will be back to the 11G, and we'll focus on a brand new capability of OBIEE 11G, which is the scorecarding and strategy management component of 11G. It will include a demo and an overview on how to develop some of those strategy maps. Again, the registrations for those webinars will be available on our website by the end of today. One other thing that we like to do at the end of these webinars, just to give Marty a little bit more time here, is to give away a couple free training tokens to registrants of the webinar. And today's winners are Louis Urcia and Doug Hester. So we will be getting in touch with you to give you the information that you need to redeem your free training, which is worth upwards of $1,800. With that, Marty, have you picked out a few questions to potentially address at this time?
Yeah, we've got quite a few good ones here. So let me, I'm going to back up a little bit. There was one question they wanted to get the URL again for the parents. So I'm going to put that up real quick so anybody who wanted that would be able to get to it. And while you're writing that down, I'll go through some of these other questions that they've got. One of them is, how is, if you've got Hyperion EPM, how does that impact the deployment? And it really, from an upgrade standpoint, it doesn't, because you're upgrading components. Now, when you do your 11G installation, you would set up that 11G installation to work with your Hyperion EPM, but you're still going to go through the same upgrade process of what you saw here to upgrade the components and then have that up and running when you're going. So your EPM, if you've got it defined within the repository, that would be one of those sources that your 11G environment has to be able to access. Another question is, what is the 11G scale out for clustering? That scale out basically allows you to create additional nodes within your Fusion environment. And be able to build out your cluster. That's the method that you're going to go through, is using that. And not sure. Let's see if let's see if I got this. Maybe. If I can, I'll show you a little bit of what I'm talking about. So if we get to it, you would handle that scale out through the Enterprise Manager. And this thing's going to go a little bit slower than I probably want it to. But within the Enterprise Manager, you'll be able to get into your WebLogic domain, and as you get to the components within here, there'll be options when you get into some of these details. You'll be able to scale out through here, and it's basically just adding additional instances and nodes from within here. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time trying to navigate through here. It's kind of slow going through. So, but this is where, within the Enterprise Manager, is where you're going to get your scale out. And it's fairly documented within the Oracle documentation. So just grab a few more of these questions, try and get as many as we can in here. The BI apps with 11G, what they're expecting is the 7963 BI apps version is supposedly is what they're talking about being supported and certified in 11G. That will be the first BI apps that's supported, and so that will have an 11G migrated RPD that you would be able to just go directly with and put any kind of customizations added into there. Now, when we say certified, that means it's going to be already handled for you. Now, we do know of some clients that have gone through and migrated their own RPD with to 11G that are running on apps. Some of them have had problems, and some have had very few problems. It depends on the kind of customizations you made within your RPD, and what's in there, and what kind and how many apps you have in it, as to what kind of problems you may or may not find. Another question is terms of structure within in Linux. Really, if we're talking about directory structure, it's really not any different. You would set up your Fusion middleware home, and then the directory structure would be the same whether it's on Windows or on Linux. Got another question of what happens to any customization done in 10G, and I'm not sure what kind of customizations we're talking about. If these are customizations within the RPD, then they would come across during the upgrade migration. If it's customizations to JavaScripts or to custom messages, as I showed on the last couple slides, those would have to be manually redone within your 11G environment. And I think I could grab a couple more in here. The one question is, when is the scheduled release of 11.114? And what we're hearing right now is it should be we know the 7963, they're expecting somewhere around the first quarter or second quarter of next year. The 11.114, they don't have a confirmed date, but it will be probably somewhere around that same time frame within the first half of next year, is what I'm expecting. But they don't have a confirmed, Oracle does not have a confirmed as to when they're actually going to have that. All right, and there's a number of other ones, questions, and we'll try and get those answered and put out, but don't have a lot more time right now to try and come up with some of these, so we'll go through and make a list of what these are and make sure these are available to people. So I do appreciate your time. I hope you found that this little demonstration was useful. Some of you may have seen this, especially if you've gone to Oracle Open World. We had an upgrade demonstration there. It's very similar. It's the same process, does not change. The only thing that does change is what are your component values that you're putting through. So hopefully people got some information out of this that will be useful as to whether or not you're going to go to 11G, and when you do, what kind of steps you're going to go through to get everything migrated. Thank you very much.